What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
That is James MENNIE. He's over at the Montreal Gazette. And Jim, as promised yesterday, I will be working on a new intro or music for you. So it might take me the weekend. I'll see what I can come up with.
Listen, I was only sort of like, wondering what it might sound like.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been very happy with the intro that we've had for more than a decade.
Okay.
But I mean, knock yourself. That'll be fun. I'm always up for a little adventure.
Coming up, I'll have that for you on Monday. All right, let's talk about a couple of stories here. I'm going to make Donald Trump my question, by the way, when we come back. But you write in your headline, just like that, Trump realized he was no longer on the internet. What does that mean?
Well, I don't know if you remember, we were talking about people being harassed online, politicians specifically being harassed online. And I told you my favorite editorial cartoon, depicted a very nerdish-looking guy flying through the air, his glasses going one way, a few of his teeth going the other way, as he had just obviously been hit by a very large guy inside of a bar. Okay, and the caption for the cartoon was, "Suddenly Derek realized he was no longer on the internet." In other words, suddenly reality got up in his face. And I have to tell you, when that news broke, I found it very, very unusual because, first of all, all my training and all my experience told me that this meant he was guilty. And yet it was so funny because I remember you asked the question of our listeners earlier in the week, what do you think is going to happen? A lot of people said, I think it's going to be a hung jury.
Yeah.
And you know what? I thought it was going to be a hung jury as well because that was the easy way out. Let's face it, Trump has behaved like a mob boss, threatening witnesses, threatening judges, threatening lawyers, threatening jurors. And I thought for sure they would take the path of least resistance and say, let this be somebody else's problem. The fact they reached this decision so quickly. Back in the day when I was covering courts, I had something that I referred to as punk verdicts. In other words, you're such a lousy criminal. You're such an idiot. You're such an incompetent. The jury can't even be bothered to spend that much time, assessing whether or not it's so clear you're absolutely guilty. And every single count he was charged with, he was found guilty on. Look at him today. I know people are saying, oh, well, there might be a civil war. I'm not entirely sure the guy that I saw at a press conference today is going to be capable of summoning up the energy to wake up tomorrow morning, much less, launch a civil war or launch a challenge to the authority in the United States of America. I think a lot changed yesterday afternoon with that verdict, Aaron. And I was the guy, if nothing else, I was the guy who fully expected Trump to walk for no other reason than he's a rich white guy. But on the other hand, what happened yesterday suggests to me that there may be something happening that we are not seeing, or certainly mainstream media is not seeing or paying attention to. I think the key, if you will, of this symphony of discord that has been Donald Trump has changed, and I think from now on you're going to see him covered perhaps in a different perspective. I would have preferred if every newsroom in the U.S. had assigned reporters today to ask every member of the Republican caucus in the House and the Senate, do you still support Donald Trump? I hope that assignment is still handed out. But in the meantime, it's been a fascinating 24 hours, and I think it's far from over.
I had a criminal lawyer on in New York earlier in the show asking him what happens, and I was not aware of this, but, Donald Trump will have to get a probation officer. That's part of what happens when there's been a sentence.
Well, let's see what he gets hit with. Personally, they say, well, you could go to prison for 4 years. I want him put in jail for a month, no more than that. He can bring his detail. He can bring his Secret Service detail with him as well. I want him just in like county lockup for a month, the orange jumpsuit. He can, if he wants to hold a press conference, well, he can't because he won't have a phone. But yeah, just long enough to have a little taste and for people to understand he's not just a convicted felon. He's done time in jail and not more than that. But like I say, there was a great photo that they moved out from the courthouse in New York this morning, and it was some supporters with a flag, a huge flag, that said Trump or death 2024. The flag was about 1.5 times bigger than the car that it was floating over. But the fact was there were no more than 20 people in that so-called groundswell of support. And I think that says a lot about the movement of support of Donald Trump. I think it's being amplified artificially by a lot of media outlets that still rely on Mr. Trump for clicks. But I think a lot of people, and not just, the soft Republican supporters of Trump. I think a lot of people yesterday took a long, hard look at what's been going on in the U.S., in their country, since 2016, and said, you know what, this is enough. This is. I think we're done with this guy.
All right, let's move on to talk about what's happening here. The Trudeau Liberals. Why, you ask, are they trolling the Official Languages Committee? What's this about?
Well, you remember the story of our good friend Francis Drouin, Franco-Ontarian Liberal MP. He's in front of the Official Languages Standing Committee. And there are a couple of witnesses from Quebec who are asserting that, you know what, if you go to an English stage, you have chances are to live the rest of your life in English. At which point, in French, he turns around and says, well, you know what, I think you're full of poo. They didn't say poo. But he did say, I think you're full of it. And, of course, there's all kinds of freaking out, and there's all kinds of outrage, and then the Bloc Québécois are clutching their pearls. But in the meantime, there has been a motion, apparently, to get Drouin kicked off the committee. So some Liberal MPs showed up. And like I said, I don't know if this is a trolling thing or if he was serious. Angelo Iacono is a Liberal MP for Alfred-Talent in Laval. And he's talking to the committee today. He says, well, I think Quebec should become a bilingual jurisdiction, because that way people will have the option of being able to learn French. He goes, look at me. I wanted to go to French school, but the Québécois de souche did not want Italians in their system. They felt threatened by us. I got my education in English, even though I should have had it in French. I studied at McGill. I completed my law studies at UQAM, which was, the most French university I could go to. And look at me, I speak French. There's a few words I don't get. Now, with all due respect, I mean, Mr. Iacono may have just been trolling. He may have been having some fun because they were obviously trying to stall the proceeding of going after Mr. Drouin. But to hear, of all people, a member of Justin Trudeau's caucus, and that party's, track record in terms of defending Anglo rights in Quebec, to hear not one but two of them drop a couple of, rather provocative bombshells over the space of 3 weeks makes me wonder whether someone's having a little too much fun. Is there a mutiny going on in the caucus right now over how Justin Trudeau has been running his party? I'm not sure, but I got to tell you, I'm hearing Liberal MPs say things that seem to fly in the face of their party's policy, and certainly fly in the face of the supposed discipline that Justin Trudeau exercises on that party.
That would have got you paddled before if you'd said that, wouldn't it?
No kidding. Well, remember that poor
Lambropoulos. Yeah.
The Liberal MP for Saint Laurent, her last name is Lambropoulos.
Yeah.
Remember she suggested that the French language was not in danger in Quebec, and they did. Even her own party.
That's the last we heard of her. Yeah.
At the stake.
Yeah. That's why I'm saying this. Someone. You're right. Maybe we're starting to hear much more of this, and I wonder what that actually signals at the end of the day. If Justin Trudeau's kind of lost the grip here, or are they all assuming he's not going to be running again? Because it doesn't seem like they care.
All know when it comes to the federal Liberals, stick a fork in them, they're done.
Yeah. All right. Let me move on real quick. Transit financing, Geneviève Guilbeault making a big deal about this a couple of weeks ago, then saying I'll meet with municipal mayors. Then yesterday we find out, well, guess what? If you live in Greater Montreal, your 59 is going to turn into about $150 for your car registration. So where does this take us?
And isn't it marvelous? We have all these mayors on one side, and we have all these cabinet ministers on the other, and Madame Guilbeault stands up and says, it's not my fault. It's not my fault. Don't you dare call this the Guilbeault tax. This is the mayors. They had the power to do this. They decided to exercise that power. C'est pas my fault. It's not my job. But here's the problem. Those deficits are there. Here's the problem. Those cuts are going to have to be made unless those deficits are covered. And thus far, everyone just seems to be, scrambling to avoid any kind of blame and or responsibility in this. And the clock is ticking. We're stuck in the middle iron, and frankly, it doesn't look very hopeful in terms of this being settled anytime soon.
All right, Jim, we'll leave it at that. You have a good weekend. Thanks so much.
You too, buddy.